Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Women in Scotland are not safe. They are not guaranteed safety. There is no concern for their safety, especially vulnerable women. Vulnerable women need to fend for themselves, and if they are attacked by a man, then that is done at the direct behest of the Scottish Government. They are allowing it. They are not just allowing it, indeed, they're condoning it. They're encouraging it. They're encouraging dangerous men to attack women. And how do we know this? Well, the Chief Executive of the Scottish Prison Service, Theresa Medhurst, has been giving evidence in a committee about the female estate in prisons, and she is saying that she cannot guarantee that men convicted of some pretty nasty physical stuff will not be locked up with women. She's saying you will have a female-only jail in which basically violent men will be locked away with vulnerable women, and there is nothing she can do about it because the SNP government have said that this is perfectly acceptable. It's clearly not. Let's have a look at this story to see why women in Scotland are literally second-class citizens. But then look who the First Minister is. He treats women as second-class citizens anyway, doesn't he? Part of his culture. Let's have a look. So, any ladies watching, please be aware that if you're in Scotland, you don't count. You are not considered in any way important. Your safety is not important. And gentlemen, look to your mothers, your daughters, your sisters, your wives, your girlfriends, your nieces. Look to your female friends and realise that according to the SNP, they are not worthy of protection. They can be locked up with very, very aggressive, physically, intimidating men who have committed very terrible crimes against women. And that's okay because these men now pretend that they're women and therefore they are women in the eyes of the SNP, and whatever goes on in prison is just unfortunate. There's certainly not going to be any protections there. And this is the state of affairs. This is where you are by voting SNP. And any SNP voters out there, do you have anyone that you know that's in prison, female? Would you want them to be attacked by a man? Because that's what you're voting for. But then we all know that you're all peas anyway, so it's hardly worthy. You probably don't care. But it is a very terrible thing that vulnerable women especially will be faced with being locked in a cell for 23 hours with a man who's committed sometimes the most appalling crimes. But there you go. That's what Humza Yousaf likes. It's what he wants. It's what his plan for Scotland is. Women, will you start walking 5 paces behind? Know your place. Scott's prison chief cannot guarantee violent men won't be put in female jails. Scottish Prison Service Chief Executive Theresa Medhurst was grilled by MSPs about its new policy for looking after trans prisoners, men. But she could not confirm whether men with a very, very bad history against females would be outright banned from the female estate. The boss of Scotland's prison service refused to guarantee that these men would not be situated in female prisoners if they pretended that they were female. Theresa Medhurst confirmed that there would need to be very exceptional circumstances before a man with a history of like this towards women and girls would be considered for the female estate. And she was quizzed on the Scottish Prison Service's new guidance for how men are dealt with. An urgent review was launched into this last year after a convicted double Ara of women was housed in Cornton Vale, a woman's prison, because he pretended that he was a woman. The idea of Isla Bryson, or Adam as we like to call him because that's his real name after all, caused shockwaves across the world as he was initially placed in the female estate despite committing vile crimes against women. After a widespread outcry, he was moved to a male jail instead, where he is currently serving his sentence. It's nice to see that the paper are calling him a him. He has to be a him. It's illegal to put a woman into a male prison, and therefore he has to be male in law, and so male he is. New guidance for treating cases like this was published by the SPS in December, but it has been roundly criticised by some women's rights groups. It would be roundly criticised by anyone who's read it. or anyone who's decent, or anyone who is not an absolute misogynistic... I can't even say the words because I'd be thrown off YouTube if I was to describe them how I want to describe them. Anyway, it confirmed that men with a history of violence against women and girls will not be held in female prisons unless, and the very fact that there's an unless means it could happen. And they say unless there is compelling evidence that they do not present a risk. The very fact that there is an unless means that at some point a woman will be locked in a cell with a man like this. It will happen. Now, I suggest that the law is changed, and that is simply they do a blood test. Now, we all know if they're male or female or not, but we have the blood test to show in law that this person is male or female based on their genetics. And they go into the jail that they are genetically suited for. And they can pretend they're a woman all they like. Call me Susan, look at me in me A-line skirt and me stilettos and me little bit of lippy. Doesn't matter, mate. You're still a bloke. Into Berlin you go. I'm sure you'll have a great time in there. Anyway, there was a significant change from its previous policy as it's now individualised, with men initially placed in the male estate until sufficient information is known on whether they can be admitted in accordance with their chosen gender. There should be no chosen gender, there should just be gender. And of course, the fact there, in fact, is just be sex, not gender. Gender does not equal sex. But they should be put in prison based on sex, not gender. This will include a risk assessment of whether their past crimes will be taken into account, and including the likes of, ending someone's life, doing terrible sexual things to them, assaulting them, and especially against women. However, critics believe that the SPS should follow the UK government in implementing a blanket ban. But again, this is one of those things we have to be different from England. We have to create a grievance. We have to do things differently just to make sure that we can have an independent Scotland. Meanwhile, we'll just lock these men up with those vulnerable women, and we don't give a shit about those vulnerable women, because after all, in Humza Yousaf's Scotland, women are truly second-class citizens. It's all part of his great master plan. That's why he wants to bring in tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of third world, unemployable, uneducated immigrants who look just like him. He's actually stopping immigration from Ukraine because, white Europeans doesn't like that. And so, of course, the SNP won't go along with the UK version of the law. They have to have their own, just to be different and just to make sure women suffer. Scottish Tory Justice spokesman Russell Findlay asked her, Theresa, to confirm that under the new guidance, if the aura of women like Isla Bryson or Adam, or indeed any male-bodied criminal or sex criminal asks for a transfer to a woman's prison, it could happen. She did say that someone who committed a crime of a sexual nature and presents a risk to a woman would not be transferred. She can guarantee that, can she? However, the inclusion of the last section led to concern from the MSP, who pointed out that a male-bodied criminal with a history of violence could be moved to the female estate if the risk assessment said this was fine. Ms Midhurst confirmed that this was highly, highly unlikely, but could still happen. And the very fact that it could still happen means undoubtedly it will, because somebody will sue and they'll be too scared to say no, because there's not a pair of balls in Holyrood. Scottish Labour Justice spokeswoman Pauline McNeill also pressed Ms Medhurst on this point, pointing out the caveat that very physical trans women, very physical men, could still be situated in women's jail in very exceptional circumstances. And she said somebody who is transgender woman, a man, who has committed an offence or history of committing offences against women and girls will not be considered for the female estate except for, and again, the except, for exceptional circumstances which would have to be very exceptional. But the very fact that the exceptional circumstances exists means it's a direct threat to the safety of women. Women treated like second-class citizens. Their safety is not guaranteed. Their personal protection is not guaranteed. They are going to be opened up so that they can be abused, hurt, attacked, ard, or even emmed by a man in a female prison. That's Humza Yousaf, Scotland. Speaking afterwards, Mr. Finlay said the prison service was unable to confirm that its new policy could result in very physical men criminals being sent into a woman's prison, and they would not say whether female staff could refuse to intimately search male-bodied inmates who identified as female. There's a thing. Would a female be forced to search a man? There is now, again in Scotland, this new law that a man who pretends to be a woman can now search and strip search a woman. Now, what are you saying here? You're saying that sexual assault is now legal in Scotland, where men can strip women and intimately search them? That's Humza Yousaf's Scotland. The Scotland where women are not protected. He said it's also farcical that the SNP Justice Minister could not explain why Humza Yousaf and Nicola Sturgeon can express doubt about an Ara's gender self-ID while staff and inmates are prohibited to do so. This policy puts the rights of male prisoners above the welfare of vulnerable, voiceless women who have often suffered at the hands of men. It is little more than a reheat of the previous policy, which resulted in Isla Brighton being sent to a woman's prison. Men, please go to women into women's prisons. Do what you like. There's nothing. No one's going to stop you. You're not going to get searched by a woman, so you can carry whatever you like on them. You can threaten them. You can do what you like. Nobody cares. Nobody cares in Humza Yousaf, Scotland. Well done. That's the world you create when you vote for the SNP. Coming up. We've got to start drawing a line. We've got to start saying no. Politicians have got to grow balls. They've got to grow a spine. They've got to stop being jellyfish. And they have to say no. We will not put men with mental conditions into ladies' jails just because they happen to want an easy time of it. They go into male jails. If they commit a crime, they go into a man's jail. And nobody gives a shit whether they call themselves Susan or not. In they go. Enjoy yourself, boys. Dress up as a lady. Have lots of fun. I'm sure the other inmates would love it. Knock yourself out. We cannot keep pandering to these pervs. And when you look at the numbers, you are 10 times more likely to be a sex offender in prison if you're trans than if you're not. 10 times. This isn't my numbers. Government's numbers. The government's own numbers. Trans prisoners, 10 times more likely to be sex offenders. That tells you all you need to know. And that is why you need to make sure your children are well away from them. But everyone needs to be away. They need mental help, not physical help. They do not need to be pandered to. They need to be cured. Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much. It's a shame that we don't have a party in charge with some sense of decency, some sense of honour, and with some sense of how vulnerable women are when they're locked in a cell with a man. Till next time, stay safe, stay well, and for heaven's sake, vote these degenerates out. Bye.